Before I get down to business boring you with the homily, I would like to share another word or repeat a word that was heard in our reading from Paul to the Romans. Paul says, "For all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received a spirit of adoption. When we cry, 'Abba, Father,' it is that very Spirit bearing witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ." Today I want to tell you a story from my misspent youth. It happened a while ago. It was the summer that Nixon resigned. So yes, it's a little while ago. I said it was from my youth. And I misspent my youth with a couple of my friends named John and David. And of the three, I am the only one living, which means, of course, that I can lie as much as I want to, and who can call me on it. Yeah, I lost my friend John, who was my first friend and my next-door neighbor, shortly after he was discharged from the Navy, overdose. And I conducted his funeral shortly after I was ordained. And my friend David died just this last week, pancreatic cancer. And Tuesday, I will preside at his funeral. And so I've been thinking about my friends and thinking about our mutually shared misspent youth. I grew up on a street that dead-ended onto the ball fields and the overflow land that was behind the high school and one of the elementary schools in North Tonawanda. And so as kids, we spent oodles of time back in those fields. We hit golf balls out into the football practice fields. We played catch, we played football, touch football, we played baseball back there. We ran around on the quarter-mile track and raced one another informally. And, we had a great time. We rode our bikes on the gravel paths that had been laid to the street, to the schools, and just had a ball. But of course, we were kids. And so we also got in trouble back there. My elementary school was a long, low, one-story, flat-roofed affair. If you had a drone and you looked down on it, it would look like the letter H. And it was all one floor except the middle bar of the letter H, and that's where the gym was. So there it had a tall building, but every place else it was low and flat. And at the bottom leg of the right leg of the H was where all the utilities went into the building, water, electric, and gas. And on this particular day, it was gas that had caught our attention. Because it's a big building, it had a very big gas meter outside with some sizable pipes, one coming out of the ground and one going up out of the meter and then making a 90-degree turn into the wall of the building, up fairly high. Now, if you looked at this as an architect, an engineer, a custodian, you'd say, yeah, this is just where the service entrance is for the school. But to us kids, that gas meter looked like an invitation. To a lawyer, it would look like an attractive nuisance. And so we made an attractive nuisance of ourselves. And we decided that we would use that gas meter as the means whereby we could climb up onto the flat roof of the school. Because, well, why would you ask that kind of a question? What do you mean, because? Did anybody ask Sir Hillary why he climbed Everest? Because it was there. Because we were 13 years old. Because we had time on our hands. Because who wanted to be the one who was the chicken who wouldn't do it? So, of course, we did it. We climbed up on the gas meter and we kind of shimmied our way up onto the pipe, and then when you stand on the pipe, you could pull yourself up over the little parapet and get up onto the roof of the building, which we did. There was nothing to see up there. Our view was improved by being at an elevation of, 10 or 12 feet. Whoop-dee-doo. We did find a lot of leftover balls that had been thrown up there, and people hadn't been able to retrieve a frisbee or two. But apart from that, it was a tour of gravel on a flat roof with some protruding vent pipes from the plumbing. It was nothing to see. And after we'd wandered around and, did this silly thing, we did it for bragging rights. You might as well say we did it so that I could tell you this story today, right? And we're done. And I was thinking as we were moseying back to that gas meter that it was probably going to be a little more tricky getting down off the roof, putting your feet onto that pipe that goes into the wall, and then onto the gas meter without breaking your arm or leg or neck. And I was kind of a little bit shaky, but not showing it because after all, I'm one of the guys. And I was just kind of putting one foot gingerly over the edge of the building when out of my eye I saw the car. And then it was right there. No lights, no sirens, but yes, indeed, it was one of North Tonawonda's finest in a patrol car. And I thought for a second that this would be a good opportunity to run and jump. But I thought I'll never outrun the cops on a broken leg. So I climbed down as he instructed us to do, and so did my other sheepish companions. We went into the back of the police car as instructed, and we were taken to police headquarters there in North Tonawanda. They didn't cuff us, but they were not what you would call gentle with our feelings either. So we got to the police station. Each of us, I'm projecting now a little bit on my friends, but I suspect not too much, each of us feeling profoundly stupid. Stupid for having done something like this, stupid for getting caught, for Pete's sake, and worried to death about what the consequences would be for us. Well, they brought us to the police station, and they directed us to a hard bench, not unlike the hard benches upon which you have your backsides right now. A hard bench sitting in the hallway of the police station, and as we were being escorted in, the three of us, the three blind mice, the three dopes, the chief of police came out of his office, and he recognized me. Not because of my previous arrests. It's a small town. He recognized me because my older sister, the one who was not the disgrace to the family, the achiever, the salutatorian at the high school, my sister's best friend was his daughter. And so he spotted me, and he called over the arresting officer, and they had a whispered conversation, and then he pointed at me, and he said, "I'm calling your father." Frank Malone is going to call my dad. If he'd said, "I'm imposing the death penalty," I could not have felt worse. I knew I was in trouble, but at that point I realized it's not that my dad would be mad, that he would be ashamed of me. That this person who is kind of a casual acquaintance, but a person whose respect he didn't want to lose that day, is going to be calling him to tell him that his son was caught doing this thing and he had to come to the police station. And I thought, man, he's not going to even be able to look at me. He is going to just be disgusted with me because I'm disgusted with myself. I'm self-despising. And to make matters worse, at that point, some detective, some plainclothes person came and took my compatriots away from me. Now, they didn't get hard time either. They had the same punishment. They were taken to make calls to their families and have them picked up. But I was left sitting there on the hard bench in the hallway by myself. After about 4 days, one of the cops at the desk looks up, and I hear my father's voice say, "I've come for my son." And that's when I lost it. Because at my worst, when I was just sick of myself, he claimed me as his son. All who have the Spirit of Christ have been given not the spirit of slavery, but the spirit of adoption. And so when we cry, "Abba, Father," that is Christ's Spirit testifying within us that we are the children of God. And if children of God, then heirs, and joint heirs with Christ. God has adopted us as God's children. God has adopted us irrespective of good behavior and bad behavior. God has adopted us without any consideration about whether we are ashamed of ourselves and have good reason to be, or whether we are proud as punch. God has adopted us because that's how God is. Now, you know, in the ancient world, adoption was not like we experience it today. Adoption wasn't something that childless couples turned to in order to bring children into their homes so much. It wasn't even a practice that was designed to alleviate the problems of orphans. Adoption was more of a legal, formal endorsement, an elevation of a person to give them status and privilege. So the way it worked is something like this. Let's imagine, for the sake of this illustration, that all of us, every last one of us, is a high muckety-muck in the Greco-Roman world. And so because of the Greco-Roman world's standards, that means all of you are now by divine fiat male, because you can't be a really high muckety-muck much in Rome unless you are a male. So now you're all male, sorry. And you're wealthy, maybe you're senatorial. And so you've got a family, a wife and a couple kids, and they are who? They are your heirs. They have everything coming to them that you own and possess. And because you are a high muckety-muck in the Roman Empire, you've got some stuff. It is worth, they won't be that sad when you die. They're going to come out just fine. You also have some slaves. So some of those slaves, they do menial, back-breaking work on the estate, but some of them do high-skill work. Some of them, in fact, probably educate your children, and they may be quite intellectual. Some of them run your business. They're like the chief operations officer for your business, and you have come to rely upon them. In fact, you might, in your honest moments, admit you wouldn't be where you are if it weren't for the benefits of these slaves. And so that one slave, upon whom you really rely, who you can trust to make sure that your business is going to flourish not only today and tomorrow, but long after you're gone, much more so than that wastrel kid of yours and that wife who's only going to be, looking for a date to go to the funeral. So you think, I am going to make that slave my heir. And that's how adoption worked in the ancient Roman world. Somebody who was a nobody, somebody who had been property until a minute before they got to court, becomes part of the family, gets the name, and is an heir. So it's like the dream of the slumdog millionaire, right? It is like winning the lottery. It is a great thing that is happening to this slave. It also happened in the field of politics, right? Julius Caesar adopted Octavius so that he could be the next emperor in line in Rome. It's not entirely unheard of even in our world. How many of you drove a Toyota to church today? Well, I was worried that nobody had. Yes, okay, so the Toyota family is still ostensibly the head of the Toyota company. But the person who's chairman of the board, whose last name is Toyota, is not a blood relation to the founders of the Toyota family. Throughout their history, it has not been uncommon for them to pick out the next person who should be chair of the board, and they adopt that person, and he changes his name, and it's been a he, to Toyota, so that they could be the leader of the company and keep it a family business. So that's the kind of adoption that Paul has in mind when Paul says that we are the adopted children of God. So it's to say, not because you had it coming, but because God in grace bestows on you this incredible honor. You have been made God's daughters and sons. And so you are called in your baptism. You are called by the Spirit of God that lives within you, as Isaiah was called in the temple, with God high and lifted up. You have been called to be an heir. To be an heir with Christ means to take on what? His identity. Right? You have been brought into the mystery of the Holy Trinity of God. We are able to cry out to God, Abba, Father, by the Spirit with the Son. With the Son, we share his mission and ministry of justice and peace, of lifting up the broken and the lost and the lonely. And with the Son, we are called to offer our lives in loving sacrifice to one another, because we have been adopted as daughters and sons. So, beloved, as you sit bored on a hard bench, listen, and you will hear God saying, I've come for my daughter. I've come for my son. Amen.